الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy, and welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. And we've been talking over the last few days about, or reflecting over the last few days on relationships from the Islamic perspective. We spent a few days talking about friendships in Islam, or the Islamic perspective on friendships. And yesterday we began discussing the Islamic perspective on marriage, or reflecting on marriage from the Islamic perspective. And continuing that discussion, what I wanted to talk about today is how marriage is viewed and approached differently in Islam. Approached and viewed differently in Islam than it is in other faiths and other traditions. So I want to talk about some of the ways, not all of the ways, not going to give an exhaustive list of the ways, but talk about some of the ways that we as Muslims view and approach Islam, or should view and approach view and approach marriage in Islam differently. So number one, in our religion, marriage is very serious business. It is a very serious undertaking. It is not something which is to be taken lightly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَيْفَ تَأْخُذُونَهُ وَقَدْ أَفْضَى بَعْضُكُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ وَأَخَذْنَ مِنْكُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. He says, how can you, husbands, take back some of the gift or all of the gift that you have given your wives at the time of marriage, the marriage gift, when your wives have taken a solemn covenant or a solemn commitment, a pact, not easily broken from you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls marriage mithaqan ghalidan, a solemn pact, a solemn covenant, a solemn commitment, a pact that should not easily be broken, telling the believers, take these marriages seriously. Another way that we view marriage and approach marriage differently is that in our religion, marriage is an act of worship and a means of drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't think many people from other faiths, most people from other faiths, and particularly those people who are faithless, they definitely don't see getting married as a means of drawing closer to Allah. Many of them don't even believe in Allah. Or many of them, when they get married, the last thing that they think about is how it's going to be viewed by Allah, or how is it going to impact their relationship with Allah. But we as Muslims are supposed to approach marriage with a view or an eye to how that is going to draw us closer to Allah, or ultimately push us further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have lots of examples of this. One example is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, يَا مَعْشَرَ الشَّبَابِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمُ الْبَاءَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ وَأَحْسَنُ الْفَرْجِ. He said, O assembly of young men, whoever amongst you possesses the means for marriage, then let him get married, for it will enable him to lower his gaze and guard his chastity. That basically, get married because it will help you be a better Muslim, is what the Prophet is basically in a roundabout way saying. Okay, that we have to look at Islam as a way to get close to Allah. Another example is the same in the Prophet. He said, تُنْكُحُ الْمَرْأَةِ لِأَرْبَعٍ. He said, a woman is generally married for any one of four reasons. He said, لِمَالِهَا وَلِجَمَالِهَا وَلِحَسَبِهَا وَلِدِينِهَا فَظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. He said, a woman generally is married either because she's wealthy, or because she's beautiful, or because she has social status, a certain standing in the community, or because of her religion. He said, marry the religious one. Think about religion. Have religion in your mind, and how marrying this woman is going to draw you closer to Allah. Taribat yadak, or you'll be the loser. We also have this famous statement collected by Al-Bukhari on the authority of Sa'id ibn Jubair, who said that his teacher, Ibn Abbas, asked him, he said, هل تزوجت? He said, are you married? So Sa'id ibn Jubair said, La. He said, I'm not married yet. I'm still not married. So Ibn Abbas responded and said, فَتَزَوَّجْ فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ هَذِي الْأُمَّةِ أَكْثَرُهَا نِسَاءً. He said, then get married. For indeed the most exemplary member of this community married many wives. Meaning that follow his example and do that with the intention of what? Emulating him and getting the reward from Allah. Again, with religion in mind. And so coming back full circle, another way that Islam views and approaches marriage differently is that in our religion, marriage is an act of worship and a means of drawing closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another way that we view and approach marriage differently is that marriage in our religion is more than gratification of animal urges. We don't just get married to have sex. Just going to put it out there bluntly. It's not just about the fulfillment of animal urges. It's about the fulfillment of needs which are much more important and much more necessary of being fulfilled than animal needs. The emotional aspect of it, the companionship aspect of it, the being complete and having a life partner aspect of it. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. He says, and from His signs, from the signs of Allah in creation, is that He created for you from yourselves mates, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, that you would find repose in them, that you would find that there would be a source of tranquility for you. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, He placed between you love and mercy, love and compassion. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Indeed, in that are signs for people who reflect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that marriage is more. It's deeper. It definitely yields far more benefits than just what? Than just simple sexual or gratification or the gratification of animal urges. And that doesn't mean that that's not a part of it. But it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all. Unfortunately, it is for many people. Such that when that's no longer there or that becomes a problem, people what? They give up on the marriage. And so that, again, we have to understand that from our perspective, we don't view it like that. We don't look at marriage like that. And we don't consider that the primary reason why we get married. And if for some reason there's issues there, then we what? We just give up on the marriage, etc. There are rules specifying who we can and can't marry. We're not like the people of other faiths and the people of no faith. They can marry anyone. They can marry people from the same sex. We can't do that in Islam. They can marry people who don't share their beliefs, right? But in our religion, women cannot marry outside of their faith at all. A Muslim woman cannot marry anyone but a Muslim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَرْجِعُوهُنَّ إِلَى الْكُفَّارِ لَا هُنَّ حِلٌّ لَهُمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحِلُّونَ لَهُنْ. I'm sorry, لَا هُنَّ حِلٌّ لَهُمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحِلُّونَ لَهُنْ. He says, and do not, he talks about those believing women who would come to the Prophet ﷺ, confessing their faith and seeking asylum. Allah says, فَلَا تَرْجِعُهُنَّ إِلَى الْكُفَّارِ. He says, do not hand those believing women over to the non-believers. Believing women are not lawful to non-believers as wives. And non-believers are not lawful to believing women as husbands. And that comes to us from Surah Al-Mumtahana, the 60th chapter, verse number 10. As for Muslim men, they're allowed to marry women from the Islamic tradition, of course, and women from the Jewish and the Christian tradition, provided that they are muhsanat, provided that they are chaste. But even then, this is not encouraged. Muslim men are not encouraged to marry outside of their faith. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the context of permitting Muslim men, permitting them to marry women from the Jewish and Christian tradition, He says, وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ. He says, and whoever denies faith after believing, his deeds will be nullified. Warning men that although you are permitted to marry women from the Jewish and Christian tradition, it's not recommended. Because the fear is that some of you will be influenced by those women to leave Islam and to adopt their tradition. And so it's not recommended, although it is permitted, because of the potential that the Muslim man will guide them to what? Islam. We've seen both. We've seen both play out. But from the guidelines, and from the approaches, or the ways that Islam approaches marriage differently, is that when things go bad in our marriages, we can't just give up. We can't just cut bait and run, which is what many people do. Many people nowadays, When things aren't going well, as soon as there is trouble in paradise, they do what? They want to get a divorce. They want to split up. And unfortunately, a lot of Muslims are adopting the same approach, the approach of people of other traditions in their marriages. As soon as there's a problem, as soon as there's trouble in paradise, I'm out of here. I don't want to do it anymore. I give up. I want a divorce. I want to get out. In our faith, we can't do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to exhaust every effort to make our marriages work. That doesn't mean that we don't believe in divorce. It doesn't mean that we're like the Catholics, that there's no such thing as divorce. No, there is a way out. There is a way out if it's just not working. But at the first sight of difficulty, if there's some hardship, if there's some struggle, we just don't give up. We work at it until we realize that it's not working, it's not workable, it's not fixable, right? These differences are irreconcilable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. He says that when there is trouble in paradise, and when it appears that the two spouses might separate, they might part ways, فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ. Don't just give up. Don't just, divorce her then and there's more fish in the sea. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ. Appoint an arbiter, an adjudicator from his family, and an arbiter, an adjudicator from her family. And let them come and try to find a way to reconcile between them. إِن يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا. If they want reconciliation, Allah will make harmony between them. If they truly are sincere in wanting reconciliation. And so in this way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alluding to the fact that we just can't give up. We just can't cut bait and run. We have to work. We have to try. We have to strive. We have to do our best to make it work. And if it doesn't work, if it's not workable, then we have the right. We've been authorized and licensed by Allah to look for happiness elsewhere. طيب, another point that I want to make before we close out of how Islam approaches and views marriage differently is that in Islam, there are specific rules on how we are supposed to treat our spouses. It's not up to us to have our own personal approach to how we treat our spouses, right? But rather, Islam gives us certain guidelines and tells us, look, you have to treat your spouse like this. You can't treat your spouse like this. You can't say this to your spouse. You can't do this to your spouse, right? And one example is the statement of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, "Istawsu bin nisa'i khayran." He said, treat women kindly. He also said in one hadith, "Rifqan bil qawarid." He said, treat women gently because they are like fragile vessels of glass. I say this, and also the Prophet on the other side of it, he told women to honor, to obey, to respect, and to be submissive to their husbands. And so we have guidance on how we're supposed to treat each other. And this is important because as we come full circle, we learn that Islam has taught us how to view and approach marriage differently. But if Islam is teaching us this, then we need to what? We need to learn the Islamic perspective and approach to marriage, and we need to act accordingly. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that we're coming into Islam, or we're being influenced, if we're already Muslims, we're being influenced by the non-Muslim culture, and we're conducting our affairs in marriage the way they conduct their affairs. We're adopting those un-Islamic approaches and views of marriage, sometimes bringing those ridiculous expectations of the non-Muslims, where they watch these television shows and these soap operas and these movies, and they see people who are always happy, they're always on vacation, they never work, they never have any difficulty or problems, and they expect their marriage to be like that. And when it isn't, then they think that something is wrong with this husband or something is wrong with this wife, and I need to find somebody else. Or they bring the toxicity of non-Muslim marriages or the marriages in the non-Muslim tradition. And that toxicity is where you're testing the person. You're putting the person on trial. Meaning you create situations to see how they'll react. And you're expecting a certain reaction. If they don't react the way you want them to react, then what? Then they're bad people. No, it's not for us to test people. It's for Allah to test. We shouldn't be doing that, but we do. We play these games with each other and so on and so forth. Al-Muhim, we approach marriage as Muslims in a non-Islamic way. And we have to stop doing that. We have to realize our religion has taught us to view Islam differently than we did when we were non-Muslims, or view Islam, or view marriage differently than the non-Muslims view it, and to approach it differently than the non-Muslims approach it. And so we have to learn that view, that perspective, that approach, and act accordingly. More on this, brothers and sisters, in the coming days. Until then, brothers and sisters, as always, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless your houses, to bless your spouses, to bless your children, to bless your sources of livelihood and income, to bless you and make you blessed wherever you may be, to bless whatever remains of your day, to shower you with His blessings, to surround you with His protection and engulf you in His protection. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبي محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.